Hello and hi dear friends of Gartenschlaub.com. In this video we're talking about the strap leaf Diclivia Klivia miniata, another member of the Amaryllis family. The Klivia originally comes from South Africa. If we look at this on the map, it's right down here in this southern tip. There, the Klivia grows in valleys with clayey to humus-rich soil, which needs to be very well drained. There. Of course, the temperatures can drop down to freezing. The Klivia can actually withstand temperatures as low as -2 degrees for a short time. That means you can leave it outside on the balcony, terrace, or in the garden for as long as you want. Until the first light. Night frosts come. That means it can easily withstand temperatures down to -2 degrees. I put easily in quotation marks because even if it freezes overnight, the moisture in the soil will naturally freeze. And that then squeezes the roots. It also depends on where the plant is located in terms of the size, what size of the pot that is, and whether you've already provided winter protection so that the pot doesn't freeze too quickly. It's important to mention this at this point. The Klivia can reach a height of up to 45 centimeters, is perennial, just like it is with the Amaryllis family. And in its young years, that's not the case yet. The older the plant gets, the more rhizomes it will develop. That means the older the plant is, the more it spreads through rhizomes. This, in turn, gives us a clue on how to propagate the plant. On one hand, of course, vegetatively, through rhizome cuttings or through the shoots that form on the sides of an older plant. I'll explain more about that in a moment. And generatively through sowing, Klivia miniata can be propagated through self-pollination. Self-pollination means that you can simply pollinate the flower with its own pollen. To do this, you need to find the stigma and the pollen on the flower. And then you dab the areas accordingly so that the stigma gets fertilized. And then a seed forms. In doing so, one must of knowledge. Sowing takes a very long time. And it easily takes about 3 years until the Klivia blooms for the first time. That's a challenge. Anyone who wants to take on this challenge can definitely give it a try. Another option is if you really want to propagate Klivia. As I already mentioned, it forms rhizomes and you can do that through the side shoots. You have to pay attention to that the side shoots have at least 3 pairs of leaves. So not 3 leaves here on the side, but 1, 2 is a pair of leaves, and you need 3 of those along with enough root mass. You need to have, then you can cut off the side shoot and plant it in a new pot. As a growing medium, you use a very well-draining soil. You know, I'm a very, very big fan of coconut substrate. And you can use it here without any problems. Because it has the properties that the roots get a lot of air, there is also a certain water retention capacity, and the water can drain away very quickly. If you're interested in the topic of Klivias, then sooner or later you'll come up with the idea. And you want to know how many different Klivias are there. And are there other flower colors like the orange that this Klivia has here? Yes, there are. For example, there is the variant of variety Citrina. It has yellowish flowers. Between yellowish and orange, there are also, of course, transitional forms. The light yellow ones are dark yellow, are red, and then you have to look where you can find one plant or another. I wanted to track down a yellow flowering variety for this contribution. I wasn't able to do that in the short term. I could have managed that by next week, but as long as this cleve is now blooming, I naturally wanted to make the video accordingly. Produce and create it for you. The Klivia is also referred to as a strap leaf. As I mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned that because the leaves look similar to a strap. A strap, if you imagine a V-belt for example, this is also a relatively flat band where accordingly there is a marbling present. That corresponds, let's say, to this leaf. Back then, when the explorers discovered the Klivia, there were of course no V-belts. as we know them today. There probably weren't any V-belts in the sense that we have them now in relation to cars, but for example, you also know the belt strap. It also looks very similar to a belt. I mean, it wouldn't be that stable, so that it keeps the pants up permanently, but it does look like a belt strap. And there, you can explain it that way, or a leather strap. So, a strap doesn't have to be a belt or anything like that, but just a leather strap, because the texture really does look very similar. It looks very similar to a leather strap. That's all for the explanation. You don't find much on the internet. I came up with this interpretation of the strap, all by myself. And I think I'm not necessarily going in the wrong direction with that. How do I get a Klivie to bloom again? It's similar with the Klivie as it is with the amaryllis. It just has a few specific nuances. The Klivie, like the amaryllis, or hippeastrum to be more precise, it also needs to go through a resting phase. This resting phase usually begins in October, because that's when the temperatures slowly drop, heading towards freezing, and we gradually enter winter. And from this point on, the Klivie shouldn't be watered anymore, and definitely shouldn't be fertilized. It's important in the care of the Klivie that the root ball never completely dries out. So, it must not completely dry out. It always has to be slightly moist, but it must not be constantly wet. That's almost... For all plants, it's deadly if the root ball is too wet. Unless it's in water plants, that explains itself. The winter dormancy lasts for a period of at least 2 months. Of course, 4 months are better, which means October, November, December, and then in January. As soon as the bloom is supposed to start, just like it is with this plant now. We're now in mid-January, so it's just the right time for the bloom to develop. The conditions for overwintering are similar to those of the amaryllis, also cool. 10 degrees should be maintained. As I said, the plant can withstand frost, down to -2 degrees. That means the temperature range for overwintering will be between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. During the wintering period, the plant should still be in a bright spot. That's very important because it keeps the leaves. You can see that here, it wouldn't keep the leaves. There would be significantly fewer leaves present. With the amaryllis, you know that during the blooming phase, it has no leaves, or maybe just a few at the bottom. The leaves come after the bloom, as soon as the plant is in the winter, at the end of January. It shows clear growth of the flower shoot. Only then can you slowly acclimate the plant to higher temperatures and increased watering. The watering should be done relatively low, gradually increase it little by little. The brightness usually adjusts to the winter time. If the brightness is not sufficient, you can of course use artificial light during the wintering period. The fertilizer applications, every 2 weeks you should start to gradually increase it. And then it's important that the temperature really only increases minimally during this period. When you change the temperature quickly, it switches over really quickly. For example, you keep the plant in the hallway, where it is usually cooler, and then you bring it into the living room, where it is usually heated and warmer in winter. Then it will be similar to the blooming phase, like it is with dendrobium orchids. Also stop abruptly, or they might not be able to fully develop the bloom. That means the bloom can, for example, get stuck, not develop further. And those are the little difficulties that one has. That means it is absolutely important and essential that the flower spike has developed nicely and is clearly recognizable as a flower spike. And the buds are best recognized already. And then you can slowly acclimate the plant to the higher temperatures. When the blooming period is over, like this, from the end of May to the beginning or middle of June, you'll notice that the flowers naturally start to fade away. You can just break them off. It's like a kind of predetermined breaking point. You just pinch off the flowers. And as soon as the flower stem starts to turn yellow, you can take a disinfected knife or cutting tool and completely remove the flower spike. And then you can put the plant outside at the end of May or mid-June, when the flowers are. Once the ice saints are over and the last frosts have passed, just put it outside and continue to cultivate it in a semi-shaded spot on the terrace. And then in the fall, by the latest in October, bring it back inside. And then of course you look forward to the next bloom with proper wintering. If you're interested in the information, you might want to see a yellow flowering variety. Then feel free to write that in the comments if you have any more questions. Of course. If you have more plant video requests, write that in the comments too. Otherwise, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Until the next video, and goodbye.